Good morning. We are stepping into an arena today where, well, a battlefield where no shots are physically fired, yet an entire city's hospital network can just go dark in an instant.
Good morning. Yes, it is a sobering reality. Usually, when we report on matters of national defense, there is a certain expectation of precision.
Right, much like a medical diagnosis, you break an arm, the x-ray reveals a jagged white line, and the physician simply points and says, there's the fracture. It provides a comforting sense of certainty.
It does. We prefer our threats to be visible, geographically categorized. But as we assess the global events this morning, we're stepping into the theater of digital warfare.
And suddenly that diagnostic x-ray machine is failing us entirely. We are
Yeah.
looking at a geopolitical landscape that is remarkably murky. Factually speaking, it is very difficult to parse.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. The boundaries defining where a conflict begins and ends are simply no longer visible to the naked eye.
They really aren't. But before we illuminate those waters, we should note, this deep dive is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application, and sponsored by ProWave AI.
Right, and ProWave AI is actually offering a March special discount on Stylo News to celebrate 1 year of operations.
Yes, the discount code SILOO can be used on the www.stylonews.com website. That is valid until the end of March and limited to the first 250 subscribers.
Let us get the official briefing details on the record.
Right. Deep dive title, Cyber Domain, The Battlefield Without Borders, Deep dive region, Cyber Domain, deep dive date, March 2026.
Excellent.
So our mission today is to examine the primary patterns of global cyber events over the past 2 weeks. We will be extracting verified insights from traditional news sources as well as social media platforms, specifically X.
To give you a comprehensive understanding of the current situation.
Exactly. And as a brief note of context, the Stylo News application generating this data is actually the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is significant because that software is utilized for enterprise operations by government, military, and corporate entities.
Right, which means you are getting unique access to the very tools designed to support global decision makers.
Now, before we proceed with the briefing itself, a strict neutrality disclaimer is required for our listeners.
Yes, very important.
The sources we are reviewing today contain highly politically charged content regarding active international conflicts. We must impartially declare that we are maintaining absolute neutrality.
Right, we are not endorsing any viewpoints presented by the state actors or the media outlets.
Exactly. We are simply reporting the facts, the differing perspectives, and the proposed strategies exactly as they appear in the source material, without any bias. Our objective here is to inform, certainly not to generate fear.
Well said. Okay, let's unpack this. If we look at the most prominent pattern from late February and early March, it's as if the battlefield has moved from trenches directly into the operating rooms and supply chains of our hometowns.
Yes, the tactical integration we are seeing is truly unprecedented. Kinetic strikes, physical bombings are almost immediately answered by digital counteroffensives in the Middle East.
The lines between traditional warfare and digital retaliation have entirely evaporated. Let's look at the March 11th and 12th events. A massive cyber attack struck Stryker, which is a medical technology giant based in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
And the operational impacts there were severe.
They were. Data was systematically wiped from Windows-based devices across 79 different countries.
Just to understand the localized human impact of that scale, a robotic knee surgery in New Hampshire was delayed by 2 hours precisely due to those network disruptions.
A local hospital procedure halted by an international cyber event, and Stryker stock subsequently dropped by 3.6%.
Which brings us to the attribution, which reveals a much broader geopolitical context. A pro-Iranian hacking group operating under the name Handala publicly claimed responsibility.
Right, and they explicitly stated this attack was direct retaliation for U.S. and Israeli military strikes.
Specifically, they cited the recent bombing of a girls' school in Mineb, Iran.
But let us pause and consider the logic there. How does a hacking group justify targeting a robotics knee surgery in New Hampshire as a proportional response to a physical bombing in Minab? Those targets could not be further apart in nature.
Well, it is the very essence of asymmetric warfare. Handala and similar state-aligned actors hold a perspective that views digital warfare as a perfectly legitimate method of retaliation.
Because they know they cannot match the physical air superiority of Western forces.
Precisely. By targeting private infrastructure like Stryker, they aim to inflict a level of economic and operational paralysis that rivals traditional military impacts. They are deliberately bypassing military defenses to strike soft civilian targets.
And this exchange is highly reciprocal. Reports indicate that Israeli intelligence successfully hacked into Tehran's traffic cameras, which was a calculated move that actually reduced Iran's internet accessibility to just 4%.
A near total blackout.
Yes, and this digital blackout reportedly aided physical military operations on the ground. Then, in immediate retaliation, Iranian forces launched physical and digital attacks against Amazon Web Services data centers located in the UAE and Bahrain.
The responses from decision makers vary wildly here, largely depending on their resources. Stryker's immediate operational focus was strictly on containment. Interestingly, they confirmed that no ransomware was utilized.
Meaning the motive was pure disruption, not financial extortion.
Exactly. Their strategy going forward is to safely restore global operations while working alongside cybersecurity experts. Conversely, on the federal level, the U.S. government, including CISA and the Department of Homeland Security, are actively monitoring these threats.
But they are currently operating with significantly reduced staffing due to ongoing funding lapses.
Which is deeply concerning.
It means the very agencies tasked with defending the digital homeland are essentially fighting with one hand tied behind their back. Their stated approach right now relies heavily on heightened vigilance and public-private intelligence sharing.
And if we look at the sentiment across our sources, the narrative really diverges based on where the news originates.
Right. MIG News, for instance, focuses heavily on the hackers' claims and their political motivations, framing it almost entirely through the lens of the Middle Eastern conflict.
While local outlets like WMMUR in the U.S. focus strictly on the localized healthcare impacts, the delayed procedures in New Hampshire.
Meanwhile, on social media platforms like X, the overarching sentiment reflects deep, pervasive concern over the severe vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure. People are realizing that international conflicts are bleeding directly into their local hospitals.
What's fascinating here is that these events show us that while offensive cyber capabilities are highly sophisticated, defensive public infrastructure remains critically vulnerable.
Right, which forces the hand of global regulators.
Exactly. It forces governments to rely on diplomatic sanctions rather than purely technological defenses. They simply cannot build an impenetrable digital wall.
Which explains the next significant pattern we are tracking: the desperate struggle for global governance and securing digital borders. The European Union recently took decisive, really unprecedented action.
Yes, they imposed formal sanctions on two Chinese companies, Integrity Technology Group and Angsen, as well as an Iranian company named Amenet Pasargad.
And these entities were sanctioned for compromising over 65,000 devices across 6 EU member states, and for attempting to interfere in the 2024 Paris Olympics.
The EU Council is clearly attempting to take a firm stance on digital sovereignty.
But I have to ask about the efficacy of this. How does freezing assets or issuing a diplomatic sanction actually stop a sophisticated hacker sitting in a basement in Tehran or Beijing? It feels a bit like trying to stop a flood with a strongly worded letter.
It is a strategy of deterrence born out of pure necessity. They are attempting to make the economic cost of an attack significantly higher than the strategic benefit.
And the absolute necessity for those defenses is glaringly clear when we examine recent domestic breaches. Take Sweden, for example. Hackers operating under the pseudonym Byte to Breach managed to leak the entire source code of the Swedish electronic government services.
But they didn't hit the government directly, did they?
No, they didn't. They achieved this by compromising the IT infrastructure of CGI Group, which is a third-party supplier.
The supply chain remains the weakest link. By leaking that source code, those hackers did not just steal data, they exposed the foundational architecture of the government's digital services.
It is effectively publishing the blueprints to the country's digital vault for every criminal on Earth to study.
It creates a permanent roadmap for future exploitation. And Sweden is far from alone in this. The internal network of the US FBI recently suffered a breach. UPI noted potential, though currently unconfirmed, links to Chinese actors.
If the FBI's internal network can be compromised, the psychological impact on the public is profound. And moving south, in Colombia, the National Tax Authority, DIAN, was hacked. That exposed the highly sensitive personal and financial records of 18 million taxpayers.
That is a staggering breach of privacy.
It is. Furthermore, the Cybersecurity Authority in Ghana reported over 23,000 cyber inquiries from concerned citizens in just a matter of days. And Romania's foreign ministry suffered DDoS attacks targeting their visa and consular websites.
The surface area of these attacks is genuinely global. To address this chaos, the United Nations is actively advocating for the establishment of international norms and multilateral frameworks to govern behavior in cyberspace.
SourceSendNet largely supports these regulatory efforts. FreeNews.fr frames the EU sanctions as a vital, long overdue step for European sovereignty.
Conversely, the outlet El Tiempo strongly criticizes the Colombian government for a glaring lack of proactive prevention regarding that die and hack.
Across all regions, the overall global sentiment heavily favors international collaboration, though average citizens increasingly feel exposed and utterly vulnerable.
Well, state actors and international sanctions are one piece of the puzzle, but what happens when the tools utilized by those state actors fall into the public domain?
Right, we are witnessing a terrifying shift toward the democratization of cyber weapons. Military-grade digital tools are now in the hands of ordinary citizens, financially motivated criminals, and non-state actors.
For example, a highly sophisticated, government-developed iPhone hacking tool named Karuna has recently leaked. It is now being actively deployed by criminal syndicates globally.
International law enforcement is attempting to disrupt these distribution networks. Europol, coordinating closely with 14 different countries, successfully shut down LeakBase, which was a massive stolen data forum with 142,000 users.
But shutting down LeakBase is akin to closing a stolen car lot. It disrupts the market temporarily, sure, but the blueprints for the cars, tools like Karuna, are already out there in the wild.
You cannot unring that bell.
Which brings us to a development that fundamentally alters the technological landscape as we know it. According to a March 7th report from Defense One, tech billionaire David Kilmer has officially launched the Harpocrates quantum curtain.
He has deployed a constellation of 210 CubeSats into low Earth orbit. The stated purpose is to provide free, unbreakable quantum key distribution, or QKD, encryption to anyone on the globe.
The implications of this are staggering.
Let us break down the mechanics of this. How exactly does QKD work?
It relies entirely on the principles of quantum mechanics. Data is secured using quantum states, often photons. Think of it like sending a physical letter in an envelope made of delicate soap bubbles.
Okay.
If a third party attempts to intercept or measure those quantum keys in transit, the quantum state physically collapses. The bubble pops. This immediately alerts the communicating parties to the interception.
So it is, dictated by the fundamental laws of physics, unhackable and mathematically impossible to silently intercept.
Exactly. And the impact of this Harpocrates system has been immediate and paralyzing for authorities. U.S. Signals Intelligence, or SIGINT, is suddenly operating completely blind.
Operation Crystal Dive, an active mission targeting ISIS leadership, had to be indefinitely paused because authorities could no longer intercept their communications.
It affects the geopolitical stage as well. In the Pacific, maritime monitoring of the Chinese Coast Guard in the Spratly Islands is severely hindered because those vessels have adopted this free encryption.
Furthermore, diplomatic transparency is threatened, with security concerns rising rapidly ahead of the Berlin climate talks and the upcoming Geneva summit with Russia.
The perspectives of the decision-makers here are diametrically opposed. David Kilmer is operating on a philosophy he terms technological justice. He believes in an absolute, inalienable right to privacy against government surveillance.
And conversely, U.S. national security agencies, including the CIA and NSA, are grappling with sudden, profound intelligence blindness. Their required pivot is an urgent, massive investment into alternative methods of intelligence gathering.
Which is a monumental task.
So what does this all mean for you? If unbreakable encryption is freely available to everyone, how do we balance your fundamental right to absolute digital privacy with the authorities' need to track genuine threats to global security?
It is the defining regulatory and philosophical challenge of the decade, and the financial markets, never slow to react, are pricing in this new reality aggressively.
Yes. Transitioning to our final analysis, market dynamics, and anticipating the next moves on this borderless battlefield. The U.S. defense industry is currently booming amid a shift to what analysts term war-footing economics.
We are seeing venture capital pouring into the sector at unprecedented rates. Companies like Anduril are experiencing massive growth.
We also note significant private investments, such as Eric Trump investing $1.5 billion in the Israeli drone maker Extend.
Here is where the data reveals a true paradigm shift. Traditional legacy defense stocks, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, RTX, and Northrop Grumman, are rallying heavily as the military budget potentially expands to $1.5 trillion.
But the priority is now squarely on software, AI, cyber defense, and space systems, rather than solely on traditional physical hardware.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are seeing a permanent structural shift where software and data are valued as highly as physical munitions. This completely redefines defense spending for the coming decade.
Based on the intelligence gathered across these sources, here are the most likely upcoming events you should watch for. First, expect a significant surge in AI-driven phishing and deepfakes being integrated into these cyber campaigns.
AI allows for highly personalized, context-aware social engineering at scale.
Second, watch for escalated retaliatory cyber operations targeting regional financial institutions. Cybersecurity firm Imperva notes that unprecedented volumes of attacks are already being directed at financial sectors.
Finally, look out for global tech companies releasing vital, out-of-cycle quarterly security patches to counter leak tools like Karuna.
Maintaining situational awareness of these factors is critical. That concludes the analytical briefing portion of today's broadcast. We will now formally transition to explaining our sponsor.
Stylo News is a comprehensive mobile and computer application that you can download to customize personal intelligence style briefs.
The application aggregates and analyzes data, pulling from over 250 traditional news sources and social media, including X, in real time.
We encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News to get AI-powered news on demand from www.stylonews.com.
As we conclude the formal broadcast, we leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider. If technologies like the Hippocrates quantum curtain make digital interception mathematically impossible, will we see a massive resurgence in old-school, analog human espionage?
It is a fascinating paradox. Could the ultimate result of unbreakable digital security be a forced return to the days of covert physical meetings and whispered secrets in a hyper-digital age?
That digital X-ray machine we discussed at the top of the hour isn't just broken. It might be rendered entirely obsolete, forcing us back into the muddy waters to search for the truth by hand.
Indeed.
And taking off the serious news anchor hats for a second, wow, that was like a lot to cover.
Yeah, a massive amount of information.
Thank you so much for hanging out and listening to this deep dive today. We know it's a really heavy topic, but we hope breaking down the why and the how behind these headlines helps you navigate it all a bit better.
Oh, absolutely. It is always so much fun to unpack these incredibly complex systems with you. While the landscape is shifting quickly, staying informed is just the best tool you have.
For sure. And we'd love to hear what's on your mind. Please feel free to request topics for future deep dives, and definitely go follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to keep the conversation going.
Let us know what you think.
Exactly. Stay curious, stay safe out there, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.